The snow fell in thick, heavy flakes that December evening, covering the city in a pristine white blanket that might have been beautiful, if not for the biting cold that came with it. At the bus stop on Fifth Avenue, a woman in light blue scrubs hugged herself tightly, trying to keep warm. Her name was May, and after working a double shift at City General Hospital, all she wanted was to get home, take a hot shower, and fall into bed. May checked her phone again and sighed. 40 more minutes until the next bus. The transportation app had been showing delays all evening due to the unexpected snowstorm. She stomped her feet to keep the blood flowing and pulled her thin jacket tighter around her shoulders. The jacket wasn't meant for weather like this. None of her clothes were. When she'd left for work yesterday morning, the forecast had only mentioned a light dusting of snow, nothing like the storm that was now raging through the city. I should have asked to stay at the hospital, she muttered to herself, her breath forming small clouds in the freezing air. The staff lounge had cots for situations exactly like this. But May had been so eager to get home after working for 16 hours straight that she hadn't considered how bad the weather might get. She glanced up and down the empty street. The normally bustling avenue was eerily quiet, with most people having enough sense to stay indoors. Only the occasional car passed by, moving slowly through the accumulating snow. May checked her phone again, still 38 minutes to go. A few blocks away, David Zhang was leaving the downtown office of Zhang Medical Innovations. As the CEO of one of the city's most successful medical technology companies, he could have left hours ago, but the quarterly reports needed reviewing, and David had always been the type to make sure everything was perfect before calling it a day. "Mr. Zhang, are you sure you don't want me to call you a car service?" his assistant had asked before leaving earlier. "I'll be fine, Priya," he'd assured her. "The roads aren't that bad yet, and I've got the Range Rover with snow tires." Now, as he drove through the increasingly treacherous streets, David wondered if he'd been a bit overconfident. The snow was coming down harder than expected, and even with his vehicle's excellent handling, he found himself driving at a crawl, peering through the windshield at the whitewashed world ahead. As he approached Fifth Avenue, something caught his eye, or rather someone. A lone figure stood at the bus stop, hunched against the cold. At first David drove past, but then something made him glance in his rearview mirror. The person was wearing what looked like medical scrubs, with only a light jacket for protection. Without really thinking about it, David made a U-turn at the next intersection and headed back toward the bus stop. May was trying to distract herself by scrolling through photos on her phone, pictures of her sister's new baby, her parents back in their hometown, friends from nursing school, when a large black SUV pulled up to the curb in front of her. Instinctively, she took a step back, clutching her bag closer to her side. The city was generally safe, but as a woman alone at night, she'd learned to be cautious. The passenger window rolled down, revealing a man in his late 30s with neatly trimmed dark hair and concerned eyes. "Excuse me?" he called out over the howl of the wind. "Are you waiting for the bus?" May nodded but didn't move closer to the vehicle. "I just checked the transit app," the man continued. "They've suspended service on this route due to the storm. The roads are getting dangerous." May's heart sank. "Are you sure?" She pulled out her phone again and refreshed the app. Sure enough, a red banner had appeared across the top of the screen. "Route 42, service temporarily suspended due to weather conditions." "Oh no," she murmured. The reality of her situation sinking in. No bus meant no way home, and with the rideshare app showing 40-minute wait times due to high demand, she was effectively stranded. The man in the SUV seemed to read her thoughts. "I can give you a ride if you need one," he offered, then quickly added, "I understand if you're not comfortable with that. I could call you a cab instead, though I'm not sure how long it would take to arrive." May hesitated. Every instinct told her not to get into a car with a stranger, no matter how well-intentioned he seemed. Yet the prospect of standing in the freezing cold for who knows how long wasn't appealing either. "I'm David," the man said, seemingly understanding her hesitation. "I work at Zhang Medical Innovations. We make medical devices for hospitals. I was just heading home from the office." Something about the name rang a bell. Zhang Medical. "Wait, you make the new V-line infusion pumps?" As a nurse, May was familiar with the company's products. Their new line of infusion pumps had recently been implemented at City General and had made medication administration much more efficient. David nodded, looking slightly surprised. Yes, that's us. Do you work in healthcare? I'm a nurse at City General, May replied, taking a small step toward the car. The fact that he worked in medical technology, that his company made products she used every day, made him seem less like a stranger and more like someone adjacent to her professional world. Listen, David said. I completely understand if you're not comfortable accepting a ride, but it's freezing out there and the weather is only getting worse. At least let me take you somewhere warm where you can wait for transportation or figure out your next steps. May glanced up and down the deserted street again. The snow was falling harder now, reducing visibility to just a few feet. The thought of standing there for another hour or more was becoming increasingly unbearable. She made a quick decision. Okay, she said, just to somewhere warm. Maybe there's a coffee shop still open, or I can try to book a hotel room for the night. David nodded and unlocked the doors. May quickly moved around to the passenger side, brushing snow from her hair and clothes before climbing in. The warmth of the car's interior was immediate and welcome, and she couldn't help but let out a small sigh of relief. Thank you, she said, rubbing her hands together to warm them. I was starting to lose feeling in my toes. No problem at all, David replied, carefully pulling away from the curb. I couldn't just leave someone standing out in this weather. It's supposed to drop another 10 degrees tonight. As they drove slowly through the snow-covered streets, May found herself sneaking glances at her unexpected chauffeur. He wasn't what she'd expected a CEO to look like. No designer suit or flashy watch, just a simple button-down shirt with the sleeves rolled up and a pair of dark jeans. His car, while obviously expensive, wasn't ostentatious either. So, City General, David said, breaking the silence. That's a busy place. What department do you work in? Emergency, May replied. I just finished a double shift. We were short-staffed because of the weather. David nodded. That explains why you're out in this storm. Emergency medicine, that must be challenging work. It can be, May admitted. But it's also rewarding. Every day is different, and when you're able to help someone in their worst moment, there's nothing quite like it. As they talked, David navigated the increasingly treacherous roads. They passed a coffee shop, but the lights were off, closed early due to the weather. The same was true for the next few businesses they drove by. The city was shutting down in response to the storm. It looks like everything's closing up, David observed. Where do you live? Maybe I can drop you off at home instead. May hesitated before answering. Riverdale, she finally said. David's eyebrows rose slightly. Riverdale? That's on the other side of the city. In this weather, that could be a 2-hour drive if we can make it at all. I just heard on the radio that they're closing the bridge due to ice. May's heart sank. The bridge was the only direct route to her neighborhood. Without it, she truly was stranded. I guess I'll have to find a hotel, she said, trying to keep the worry from her voice. With the storm, hotels near the city center would likely be filling up fast with stranded commuters, and May wasn't sure her credit card could handle an unexpected expense like that, especially not at the end of the month when her account was typically at its lowest. David seemed to be considering something. He tapped his fingers on the steering wheel, then appeared to make up his mind. I have a suggestion, he said. It might sound a bit forward, but please hear me out. I live about 15 minutes from here, in a building with excellent security and a doorman. I have a guest room that's rarely used. You're welcome to stay there tonight just until the road's clear and you can get home safely. May stared at him, taken aback by the offer. It was one thing to accept a ride from a stranger, but staying at his home? That was a different matter entirely. David must have sensed her unease. I know how it sounds, he said quickly. If you're not comfortable with that, I completely understand. We can keep looking for a hotel, or if you'd prefer, I can pay for your hotel room. I just want to make sure you're safe tonight. There was something in his voice, a genuine concern that didn't seem practiced or fake. And there was the practical reality. Hotels would be scarce, expensive, and she'd still be stranded in an unfamiliar part of town. Why are you doing this? May asked. You don't even know me. David was quiet for a moment. My mother was a nurse, he finally said. She often worked late shifts, and I remember how worried my father and I would get during bad weather. There were nights she had to sleep at the hospital because she couldn't get home safely. I guess I'm just trying to do what I'd hope someone would do for her in a similar situation. His answer struck May as honest, and it resonated with her own experiences. How many times had she seen colleagues struggle with commutes during bad weather? or heard stories of nurses sleeping in their cars because they couldn't make it home between shifts. As they stopped at a red light, the snow swirling around the car, May made her decision. "Okay," she said. "I'll accept your offer for the guest room. Just for tonight until the road's clear." David nodded, and there was relief in his eyes. "Good. You're coming with me then," he said, echoing his earlier words at the bus stop. No one should be out in this weather. As they drove toward his neighborhood, neither of them could have predicted how this chance encounter during a snowstorm would change both their lives in ways they never could have imagined. The drive to David's apartment took longer than the 15 minutes he had promised. The snow had turned the normally straightforward route into a cautious journey, with visibility dropping by the minute. May sat quietly in the passenger seat, still not entirely sure she had made the right decision. But as they passed streets lined with darkened storefronts and hotels with no vacancy signs hastily taped to their doors, she felt a small sense of relief wash over her. "Sorry about the slow ride," David said, carefully navigating around a car that had slid partially onto the sidewalk. "Better safe than sorry in this weather." "No need to apologize," May replied. "I'm just grateful to be out of the cold." She rubbed her hands together, finally feeling the warmth return to her fingertips. Her scrubs were still damp from the snow, making her shiver despite the car's powerful heater. David glanced at her. "There's a blanket in the back seat if you want it. Behind your headrest." May reached back and found a soft, fleece blanket. She wrapped it around her shoulders, immediately feeling better. "Thanks," she said. "Do you always keep emergency supplies in your car?" "Force of habit," David replied. "My dad was very big on being prepared for anything. He kept our family car stocked like we were constantly heading into a disaster zone." The casual mention of his father made David seem more real, more human to May. Not just a wealthy CEO who had taken pity on her, but a person with a past, a family, quirks, and habits that had shaped him. After another 10 minutes of careful driving, they turned onto a tree-lined street where elegant pre-war buildings stood shoulder to shoulder with more modern high-rises. David pulled up to one of the older buildings, a stately structure with a green awning extending from the entrance to the curb. "Here we are," he said, putting the car in park. "Let me check if Jin is working tonight." He pulled out his phone and made a quick call. "Hi Jin, it's David Zhang. I'm outside with a guest." "Yes, in the black Range Rover." "Perfect, thank you." Almost immediately, a middle-aged man in a dark uniform hurried out from the building, holding a large umbrella. He opened May's door first, shielding her from the snow as she stepped out. "Good evening, Mr. Zhang," the doorman said. "Nasty weather we're having." "That it is, Jin. This is May. She was stranded at a bus stop because of the storm. She'll be staying in my guest room tonight." "Very good." "Sir?" Jin replied with a nod to May. "Miss, please come inside while Mr. Zhang parks the car." May followed Jin into the warm lobby, feeling slightly overwhelmed by the sudden shift from freezing at a bus stop to being escorted into what was clearly a luxury apartment building. The lobby was elegant but understated, with marble floors, wood-paneled walls, and tasteful lighting that created a cozy atmosphere despite the grand space. "Can I get you anything while you wait, miss?" Jin asked. "Some hot tea, perhaps?" "No, thank you," May said. "I'm fine." She stood awkwardly in the center of the lobby, still clutching the blanket around her shoulders, acutely aware of her rumpled scrubs and practical, scuffed work shoes against the polished elegance of her surroundings. A few minutes later, David returned, brushing snow from his coat. "All set," he said. "Let's head up." The elevator was paneled in dark wood with brass fixtures that gleamed under soft lighting. David pressed the button for the 12th floor, and they rode up in silence. May could feel the exhaustion of her double shift catching up with her now that she was warm and safe. The adrenaline that had kept her going was fading fast. "You must be tired," David observed as they stepped off the elevator. "You mentioned you worked a double shift?" May nodded. 16 hours straight. "We were short-staffed because some people couldn't make it in due to the storm warning." "That's a long time to be on your feet," David said as he led her down the hallway to a door at the end. "I hope you're hungry, though. I usually order food when I work late, but with everything closing early, I thought I'd cook something simple instead." The mention of food made May realize she was, in fact, starving. Her last meal had been a hastily eaten sandwich from the hospital cafeteria many hours ago. "You don't have to cook for me," she said quickly. "You're already doing enough by letting me stay." David smiled as he unlocked his door. "It's no trouble." Cooking helps me unwind after long days. He pushed open the door and gestured for her to enter. Welcome to my home. It's not much, but it's comfortable. May stepped inside and immediately recognized David's comment for the understatement it was. His apartment was stunning. A spacious open-concept living area with floor-to-ceiling windows that would normally offer panoramic views of the city, though tonight they showed only swirling snow against a dark sky. The space was tastefully decorated with clean lines and a mix of modern and traditional elements that somehow worked perfectly together. It was impressive without being showy, comfortable rather than opulent. This is beautiful, May said honestly. You have a lovely home. Thank you, David replied, seeming genuinely pleased by her comment. I've been here about 5 years now. The building is old, but they renovated all the units about a decade ago, so it has modern amenities with traditional architecture. Best of both worlds. He helped her out of her damp jacket and hung it on a coat rack near the door. Let me show you to the guest room so you can get settled. He led her down a hallway, past what looked like a home office and into a spacious guest bedroom with an attached bathroom. There are fresh towels in the bathroom, he said, and I can lend you some clothes to sleep in. They'll be too big, but they're clean and dry. That would be great, May said, overwhelmed by his thoughtfulness. Thank you. No need to thank me, David replied. I'll grab those clothes and give you some privacy. The bathroom has everything you should need. Toothbrush, toothpaste, that sort of thing. I keep it stocked for when my parents visit. True to his word, David returned a few minutes later with a neatly folded stack of clothes, a t-shirt, sweatpants with a drawstring waist, and a pair of thick socks. I'll be in the kitchen when you're ready, he said. Take your time. After he left, May stood for a moment, taking in her surroundings. The guest room was simple but luxurious, with a queen-sized bed made up with crisp white linens, a comfortable-looking armchair in the corner, and subtle artwork on the walls. The attached bathroom was equally impressive, with marble countertops, a glass-enclosed shower, and high-end toiletries arranged neatly on a shelf. The hot shower was exactly what May needed. She stood under the steaming water for several minutes, letting it wash away the exhaustion of her long shift and the chill that had seemed to settle in her bones while waiting at the bus stop. By the time she emerged, dressed in David's too large but wonderfully comfortable clothes, she felt like a new person. She found David in the kitchen, chopping vegetables on a wooden cutting board. The sleeves of his button-down shirt were rolled up, revealing surprisingly muscular forearms for someone she assumed spent most of his time behind a desk. A pot of something that smelled delicious was simmering on the stove. Feel better? He asked, looking up from his chopping. Much better, May replied. I can't thank you enough for all of this. Happy to help, David said. I hope you like pasta. I'm making a simple vegetable soup with some pasta shells. Comfort food for a snowy night. That sounds perfect, May said, taking a seat at the kitchen island. Can I help with anything? You've been on your feet all day. Just relax, David insisted, though I wouldn't mind the company while I finish up here. As David continued preparing the meal, they fell into surprisingly easy conversation. May found herself telling him about her job at the hospital, the challenges, the rewards, the everyday realities of working in emergency medicine. David listened attentively, asking thoughtful questions that showed genuine interest. So how does someone become a CEO of a medical technology company? May asked as David ladled the steaming soup into bowls and placed one in front of her. Did you always want to work in healthcare? David smiled as he sat down across from her with his own bowl. Not exactly. I actually studied engineering in college. My plan was to work in renewable energy, wind turbines, solar panels, that sort of thing. What changed? May asked before taking a spoonful of soup. It was delicacy. It was rich and flavorful with perfectly cooked vegetables and pasta. David was quiet for a moment, seeming to consider his answer. My mother got sick, he finally said. She had been healthy her whole life, and then suddenly she was diagnosed with a rare form of cancer. During her treatment, I spent a lot of time in hospitals. I saw how much the right equipment, or the lack of it, could impact care. May nodded, understanding immediately. Working in healthcare, she knew all too well how important proper equipment was, and how frustrating it could be when the tools needed to provide the best care weren't available. After she recovered, David continued, I decided to shift my focus. I wanted to use my engineering background to improve medical devices. I started as a product designer at a small company, then moved into management and eventually co-founded Zhang Medical with a colleague who had similar goals. That's impressive, May said. Going from engineer to CEO, and how long has it been? About 12 years, David replied. Though I never planned on being CEO. I was happy in product development, but when we started growing quickly, someone needed to take the lead. My business partner preferred to focus on research, so I stepped into the role almost by default. There was something refreshingly honest about the way he described his journey. No grand ambitions or calculated career moves, just a series of choices made with purpose and heart. Is your mother still doing well? May asked. David nodded. Very well. She and my father retired to Arizona a few years ago. The warm weather suits them. He paused, then added, They're why I have the guest room always ready. They visit a few times a year. As they continued to eat and talk, the howling wind outside created a cocoon-like feeling in the warm apartment. The conversation flowed easily from work to favorite books to places they'd traveled. May found herself laughing at David's self-deprecating stories about his early attempts at cooking and business presentations gone wrong. There was none of the awkwardness she might have expected from two strangers thrown together by circumstance. After dinner, David insisted on handling the dishes while May made herself comfortable in the living room. She found herself drawn to a bookshelf that took up most of one wall. The collection was diverse, medical journals and technical manuals sharing space with classic novels, biographies, and what looked like well-loved science fiction paperbacks. You have an impressive library, May called to David in the kitchen. Thanks, he replied, coming to join her. Reading is my escape. When work gets too intense, it's nice to step into someone else's world for a while. May ran her finger along the spine of a familiar novel. I love this one. I read it during nursing school when I needed a break from anatomy textbooks. It's one of my favorites, David said, seeming pleased by their shared taste. The author has a new book coming out next month that I pre-ordered. They settled into a comfortable conversation about books and reading habits, which eventually turned to favorite movies and TV shows. Time passed quickly, and it was only when May failed to stifle a yawn that David glanced at his watch. It's getting late, he said, and you've had an incredibly long day. We should probably turn in. May nodded, suddenly aware of just how tired she was. The comfort of the apartment and the ease of their conversation had momentarily made her forget her exhaustion, but now it hit her full force. If you need anything during the night, don't hesitate to ask, David said as he walked her back to the guest room. I'm just down the hall. And help yourself to anything in the kitchen if you get hungry. Thank you, May said. For everything. I don't know what I would have done if you hadn't stopped at that bus stop. I'm glad I did, David replied simply. Sleep well, May. As May settled into the incredibly comfortable bed a few minutes later, she found herself reflecting on the strange turn her day had taken. What had started as a miserable end to an exhausting shift had somehow led her here. To this peaceful room in a stranger's, no, not quite a stranger anymore, home. Outside, the snow continued to fall, transforming the city into a quiet wonderland. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges. Getting home, explaining her absence to her roommate, returning to the hospital for her next shift. But for now, in this moment, May felt safe, warm, and surprisingly at peace. Just before sleep claimed her, a thought drifted through her mind. Sometimes the worst situations lead to the most unexpected connections. It was a comforting thought to carry into her dreams. May woke to the unfamiliar softness of a mattress that seemed to cradle her body perfectly. For a moment she lay still, confused by her surroundings until the events of the previous night came flooding back. The bus stop, the snowstorm, David and his unexpected kindness. Sunlight streamed through a gap in the curtains, casting a warm glow across the guest room. May reached for her phone on the nightstand and was surprised to see it was already past 9. She never slept this late, but after her double shift and the stress of the night before, her body had clearly needed the rest. She sat up slowly, running her fingers through her tangled hair. She was still wearing David's borrowed clothes, the t-shirt so large it slipped off one shoulder. The apartment was quiet, and she wondered if David was already gone for the day. It was a weekday after all, and CEOs probably didn't get snow days. After freshening up in the bathroom, May decided to venture out. Her scrubs from yesterday were still damp, so she remained in David's clothes, cinching the drawstring of the sweatpants as tight as it would go so they wouldn't slide off her hips. To her surprise, she found David in the kitchen, dressed casually in jeans and a navy sweater, typing on a laptop at the island counter. He looked up when she entered and smiled. "Good morning," he said. "I hope you slept well." "Better than I have in months," May admitted. "Thank you again for letting me stay." "I'm glad you did," David replied. "Have you looked outside yet? The city's practically shut down." May moved to the floor-to-ceiling windows in the living room and gasped at the view. The snowstorm had transformed the urban landscape into something almost magical. The usually busy streets below were blanketed in white, with only a few tire tracks breaking the pristine surface. Some sidewalks had been partially cleared, but many remained untouched. In the distance, the city's skyline rose through a hazy fog of light snow that was still falling. "It's beautiful," she said, "but I should probably try to get home soon. My roommate must be wondering where I am." "I checked the transit updates this morning," David said, joining her at the window. "Most bus routes are still suspended, including yours. The subway is running on a limited schedule, but there was a power outage at 2 stations on the line that would take you to Riverdale." May's heart sank. "Really? What about rideshare?" "I tried to book one just to test it out," David said. "The wait time is over 2 hours, and they're charging 5 times the normal rate due to demand." "I guess I'm still stuck," May sighed. She turned to look at David. "I should call work and let them know I might not make it in for my shift tomorrow." "Of course," David nodded. "But first, how about some breakfast? I made coffee and I was about to cook some eggs. Are you hungry?" May realized she was in fact starving. "Breakfast sounds wonderful, actually. Perfect. Why don't you call work and your roommate while I cook?" David suggested. "The landline is there on the wall if you need it. Cell service can be spotty during storms." While David prepared breakfast, May made her calls. The hospital administrator was understanding about her situation. Many staff members were in similar predicaments due to the storm. Her roommate Lisa was relieved to hear that May was safe. "I figured you must have stayed at the hospital when you didn't come home," Lisa said. "I'm just glad you're not frozen in a snowbank somewhere." "I got lucky," May told her. "A kind stranger offered me a ride and then a place to stay when we realized I couldn't get home." "A stranger?" Lisa sounded concerned. "Are you sure that was safe? Where are you exactly?" May glanced at David, who was whisking eggs in a bowl, completely absorbed in his task. "It's fine," she assured Lisa. "He's actually the CEO of Jong Medical. You know, the company that makes those new infusion pumps we use at work." "Seriously?" Lisa's tone changed from concern to interest. "The CEO? What's he like? Is he as stuffy as most executives?" May couldn't help but smile as she watched David, now dancing slightly as he moved around the kitchen, adding ingredients to the eggs. "No, not stuffy at all. He's actually pretty normal. Listen, I'll tell you everything when I get home. Hopefully the roads will clear soon." After hanging up, May joined David in the kitchen, where he was plating what looked like gourmet omelets, golden brown and stuffed with vegetables and cheese. "Those look amazing," she said. "Family recipe," David replied. "My grandmother taught me. She believed breakfast should always be the best meal of the day." They ate at the kitchen island, the conversation flowing as easily as it had the night before. David told her about growing up in a household where his father was an engineer and his mother a nurse. How dinner conversations had often revolved around how to improve various systems and processes. "That explains a lot about you," May said. "Both your career choice and why you stopped for a stranded nurse in a snowstorm." David looked thoughtful. "I'd like to think I would have stopped for anyone in that weather. But yes, seeing you in scrubs definitely reminded me of my mother." After breakfast, they moved to the living room with fresh cups of coffee. The snow was still falling outside, though not as heavily as the night before. "I should probably try to find a way home," May said, though without much conviction. The prospect of venturing out into the snow wasn't appealing, especially when she was so comfortable right where she was. "You're welcome to stay another night if needed," David offered. "I checked the forecast and they're saying the snow should stop by evening, with road clearing continuing through the night. Things should be much better by tomorrow morning." May considered his offer. Another night in this comfortable apartment seemed far preferable to struggling through the snow and limited transportation options, only to potentially get stranded again. "If you're sure it's not an imposition?" "Not at all," David assured her. "Actually, I was thinking of working from home today. I rarely take advantage of that option, but it seems foolish to try to get to the office when half the staff won't be there anyway." "In that case, I accept," May said. though I feel terrible about imposing on you for another day. Don't, David said firmly. It's nice having the company, actually. This place can feel too big and too quiet sometimes. As David settled into work, May found herself at loose ends. She browsed his bookshelves again and selected a novel she'd been meaning to read. Time passed pleasantly as she lost herself in the story, occasionally glancing up to watch the snow falling, outside or to observe David as he worked. There was something fascinating about seeing him in his element, his brow furrowed in concentration, as he reviewed documents on his laptop, his voice confident but kind during phone calls with his team. He was clearly respected by his employees, but there was none of the fear or forced deference she might have expected from people talking to their CEO. Around midday, David closed his laptop and stretched. I need a break, he announced. How does lunch sound? Great, May replied. Can I help this time? Together they assembled sandwiches with what David had in his refrigerator: crusty bread, sliced turkey, cheese, avocado, and various condiments. It was a simple meal, but preparing it together created a sense of comfortable domesticity that felt surprisingly natural. So, David said as they sat down to eat, tell me more about your path to nursing. Was it always what you wanted to do? May considered the question. Not exactly. I actually started college as a business major. Really? David looked surprised. What changed? My grandfather got sick during my sophomore year, May explained. He lived with us and I helped care for him. The nurses who came to our home were so skilled, so compassionate. They taught me how to make him comfortable, how to recognize when his condition was changing. It made me realize that was the kind of work I wanted to do, something that directly helped people when they needed it most. David nodded, understanding in his eyes. That connection to real impact, it's powerful, isn't it? In my company, I sometimes feel too removed from the actual patients our products help. That's why I try to visit hospitals regularly, to see our devices in use and talk to the staff who work with them. That's unusual for a CEO, May observed. Most executives I've encountered stay firmly in their boardrooms. That's a mistake, in my opinion, David said. How can you improve healthcare if you don't understand what happens on the front lines? That's where the real experts are. Nurses like you who use these tools every day and see firsthand what works and what doesn't. His words warmed May. Too often, healthcare workers like her felt invisible to the corporate side of medicine, their practical knowledge and experience overlooked in favor of theoretical improvements that sometimes made their jobs harder rather than easier. After lunch, David needed to return to work for a video conference, so May went back to her book. The afternoon passed quietly, with the soft sound of David's voice in the background as he spoke with colleagues and the occasional ping of incoming emails creating a gentle rhythm to the day. By late afternoon, the snow had finally stopped. May put down her book and moved to the window, watching as city workers began the monumental task of clearing the streets. The golden light of the setting sun cast long shadows across the snow-covered landscape, turning everything it touched to glittering diamond. Beautiful, isn't it? David said, coming to stand beside her. The city always looks so clean after a snowstorm, at least for a little while. It's gorgeous, May agreed. Though I bet the emergency room is swamped with sledding accidents and people who slipped on ice. David laughed. Always the nurse thinking about who might need help. May smiled at the observation. It was true. She couldn't help but see the world through the lens of her profession, always alert to potential injuries or illnesses. It was both a blessing and a curse, this constant awareness of human fragility. I've finished my work for the day, David said, and since we're still snowed in, I thought maybe we could watch a movie. I have a decent collection, or we could stream something. A movie sounds perfect, May replied. David's decent collection turned out to be an extensive library of films, organized meticulously by genre and director. They eventually settled on a classic comedy that May had mentioned earlier as one of her favorites. As they settled onto the sofa, David on one end, May on the other with a respectful distance between them, May found herself struck by the strangeness of the situation. 2 days ago, David had been a complete stranger. Now they were sharing a quiet evening together as if they'd known each other for years. The movie was as funny as May remembered, and David's laugh was infectious, deep and genuine, sometimes accompanied by a slight snort that made May smile each time she heard it. When the film ended, They found themselves discussing favorite scenes and quotes which led to recommendations of other movies they each enjoyed. "We should order dinner," David said after a while. I checked, and a few restaurants have reopened for delivery. They decided on Thai food, with David insisting on ordering several dishes so they could sample different things. While they waited for the delivery, they moved naturally into a conversation about their families, sharing stories of childhood holidays and family traditions. "My parents were both immigrants," May explained. "They worked so hard to build a life here. My father always said education was the key to opportunity, so my sister and I were expected to excel in school." "Did you?" David asked. "My sister did," May laughed. "She's the family genius. Graduated top of her class and went on to get her PhD in chemistry. She works for a pharmaceutical company now, developing new medications." "And you?" David prompted. "I was more creative with my approach to education," May admitted. "I did well enough, but I was always more interested in the practical application of knowledge than in theory. I wanted to understand how things worked in the real world, how they affected real people." "That's a different kind of intelligence," David observed. "Equally valuable, just not always as recognized by traditional academic measures." His comment touched May. Throughout her life, she'd often felt overshadowed by her sister's academic achievements, even though she knew her parents were proud of her career in nursing. The food arrived, delivered by a cheerful young man bundled up against the cold, who accepted David's generous tip with evident gratitude. They spread the containers out on the coffee table, creating an impromptu feast as they continued their conversation. As they ate, May found herself noticing small details about David that she hadn't before. The way one corner of his mouth lifted slightly higher than the other when he smiled. The precise way he handled his chopsticks. The thoughtful pause before he answered a complex question. These observations weren't analytical in the way she might assess a patient. They were simply the natural noticing that happens when you begin to know someone. After dinner, they cleaned up together, moving around the kitchen in an easy rhythm that felt surprisingly comfortable. David loaded the dishwasher while May wiped down the counters, their actions coordinated without need for discussion. "Thank you for another wonderful meal," May said as they finished. "And for everything else, the shelter, the clothes, the company." "I should be thanking you," David replied. "This storm would have been much lonelier without you here." There was something in his voice, a warmth that made May look up and meet his eyes. For a moment, they stood there in the kitchen, something unspoken passing between them. David was the first to break the gaze, glancing at his watch. "It's getting late," he said, "and you must be tired even with last night's rest." May nodded, though she didn't feel particularly tired. "I should probably turn in. Tomorrow will likely be busy if the roads are cleared and I can get back to work." "Of course," David said. "I'll see you in the morning then." As May settled into the guest room for her second night, she found herself reflecting on the strange intimacy that had developed between them in such a short time. There was a comfort in David's presence that she couldn't quite explain, as if they had known each other in some previous life, and were simply picking up where they had left off. Outside, the city had fallen silent under its blanket of snow, creating a peaceful backdrop to her thoughts. Tomorrow, reality would resume. She would return to her apartment, to her job, to the everyday rhythms of her life. David would go back to being CEO of Jiang Medical, making decisions that affected thousands of employees and countless patients. But for now, in this snow globe moment of suspended time, they were just two people who had found an unexpected connection when one of them said, "You're coming with me." May closed her eyes, wondering what tomorrow would bring. Would this strange interlude simply become an anecdote? A story to tell friends about the time she got stranded in a snowstorm and ended up staying with a CEO? Or was it the beginning of something more? With these questions swirling in her mind, she drifted off to sleep, lulled by the distant sounds of the city slowly coming back to life beneath its winter blanket. True to the forecast, the next morning dawned clear and bright. May woke early, her body automatically readjusting to her normal schedule. The city outside was transformed, streets partially cleared, people beginning to venture out, life slowly returning to normal after the storm's interruption. David was already up when May emerged from the guest room, dressed once again in his borrowed clothes. He stood at the kitchen counter reading something on his tablet while sipping coffee. "Good morning," he said, looking up with a smile. "Sleep well?" "Very well," May replied. Looks like the weather finally cooperated, David nodded. I checked the transit updates. They're saying most bus routes should be running by noon, including yours. The roads to Riverdale are passable now, though still slow going. That's good news, May said, though she felt an unexpected twinge of disappointment. Her time in this unexpected sanctuary was coming to an end. I should be able to make my evening shift tonight. Coffee? David offered, already reaching for a mug. Please. They settled into a comfortable breakfast routine, as if they'd been sharing mornings for years rather than just this once. David made toast and scrambled eggs while May set the table and sliced fruit she found in the refrigerator. The domesticity of it all felt both strange and natural at the same time. I had an idea, David said as they sat down to eat. Your scrubs from the other night are still pretty damp. Instead of you having to wear them home, I could have my assistant drop off some fresh clothes for you. She lives nearby and managed to get to the office already. May looked down at the oversized t-shirt and sweatpants she'd been wearing. That's very kind, but there's no need to trouble her. I can manage with what I was wearing before. It's really no trouble, David insisted. Priya would be happy to help. She could bring something from the lost and found at the office. We have quite a collection of forgotten items from company events. I'm sure there would be something that fits better than my clothes. The thought of traveling home in fresh clothes rather than her damp scrubs was tempting. Well, if you're sure it's not an imposition, not at all, David said, already reaching for his phone. He sent a quick text, and a few minutes later his phone pinged with a response. Perfect. Priya will be here in about an hour with some options for you. After breakfast, they moved to the living room, where sunlight streamed through the windows, creating pools of warmth on the floor. The view of the city was spectacular in the morning light. Snow-covered rooftops stretching to the horizon, smoke rising in lazy spirals from chimneys, the occasional flash of sunlight reflecting off a window or a car windshield. It's hard to believe just 2 days ago I was freezing at that bus stop, May said, gazing out at the winter wonderland. It feels like weeks ago now, David nodded. Time is strange that way, isn't it? Some moments stretch out, while entire weeks can pass in a blur. These past 2 days have definitely been the stretched out kind, May observed. In a good way, though. I agree, David said, his eyes meeting hers with a warmth that made May look away first, suddenly self-conscious. They fell into conversation about their plans for the day. May would head home once she had proper clothes, hopefully in time to rest before her evening shift at the hospital. David had a series of video meetings scheduled but was considering going into the office later, if the roads continued to improve. The doorbell rang about an hour later. David answered it and returned with a smiling woman in her early 30s, dressed in a smart business outfit and carrying a large tote bag. May, this is Priya, my assistant and the person who actually runs the company while I pretend to be in charge, David said with a grin. Don't let him fool you, Priya said, shaking May's hand. He works harder than anyone I know. It's nice to meet you, May. David mentioned you were stranded in the storm. I'm glad he was able to help. There was nothing in Priya's manner to suggest she found anything unusual about the situation, which put May at ease. Somehow meeting someone from David's professional world made their unusual arrangement feel more normal, and less like a secret interlude. I brought a few options, Priya said, placing the tote bag on the sofa. Nothing fancy, just some casual clothes that might fit you better than David's things. She pulled out jeans, sweaters, and even a pair of boots. I wasn't sure of your size, so I brought a range. This is incredibly thoughtful, May said, touched by the gesture. Thank you so much. Happy to help, Priya replied. The city's still a mess out there. We all need to look out for each other during times like this. She turned to David. I can't stay long. The team is waiting for me to start the supply chain call. Of course, David nodded. Tell them I'll join the afternoon session as planned. After Priya left, May took the clothes to the guest room to try them on. The jeans were slightly loose but wearable, and a soft blue sweater fit surprisingly well. The boots were a bit large, but with thick socks, they would work fine for navigating the snowy streets. When she emerged, David looked up from his laptop and his expression changed subtly. A flash of something in his eyes that May couldn't quite interpret. They fit, she said unnecessarily, making a small turn. Priya has good taste. She does, David agreed. You look very nice. There was an awkward moment of silence, both of them suddenly aware that their time together was coming to an end. The easy camaraderie of the past 2 days seemed to shift. replaced by an uncertainty about what came next. "I should probably call for a car," May said finally. "It looks like the ride-sharing apps are working again, even if they're still charging surge pricing." "Let me drive you," David offered quickly. "I need to head to the office anyway for those afternoon meetings. It's no trouble to drop you at your place first." May hesitated, then nodded. "That would be great, thank you. Are you sure it's not out of your way?" "Completely sure," David said. "I'll just wrap up these emails and then we can go whenever you're ready." While David finished his work, May gathered her few belongings, her phone, her still damp uniform folded into a plastic bag that David had provided, her work shoes. She made the bed in the guest room, smoothing the covers with hospital corners out of habit, and took one last look around the space that had been her unexpected sanctuary. When she returned to the living room, David was waiting, car keys in hand. "All set?" he asked. "Yes," May replied. "Thank you again for everything. I'm not sure what I would have done if you hadn't stopped that night." "I'm just glad I did," David said simply. The drive to May's apartment building took longer than usual due to the still partially cleared roads. But the silence in the car was comfortable rather than awkward. Occasionally, David would point out particularly beautiful snow formations or comment on the progress of the city's cleanup efforts, but mostly they just enjoyed the peaceful journey through the transformed urban landscape. When they finally pulled up in front of May's building, a modest pre-war structure in a residential neighborhood, May felt a strange reluctance to get out of the car. The past 48 hours had created a bubble around them, separate from the realities of their everyday lives. Stepping out of the car meant bursting that bubble. "This is me," she said unnecessarily, gesturing to the building. David nodded. "It looks nice." "It's no luxury high-rise," May smiled, "but it's home." There was another moment of silence, both of them seemingly unsure how to say goodbye. "Listen," David said finally. "I was thinking, our medical center is doing a demonstration of our newest infusion pump models next week at City General. I'll be there to give a brief presentation to the hospital administrators and key staff. Maybe you could come by, see the latest improvements to the equipment you use every day." The invitation seemed to be about more than just medical equipment, and they both knew it. It was a bridge from this strange interlude back to their real lives, a way to see each other again without explicitly saying that's what they wanted. "I'd like that," May said. "When is it exactly?" "Wednesday at 2 p.m. in the main conference room on the 3rd floor, David replied. "It shouldn't last more than an hour." "I'll try to make it," May promised. "If my shift schedule allows," David smiled, seeming relieved. "Great. Well, I suppose I should let you get inside and rest before your evening shift." "Yes," May agreed, though she made no move to open the car door. "David, I just want to say, these past 2 days have been unexpected in the best possible way. Thank you for your kindness to a complete stranger." "You're not a stranger anymore," David said softly. The moment stretched between them, full of unspoken possibilities. Finally, May reached for the door handle. "I'll see you Wednesday," she said. "Drive safely." "I will," David promised. "Take care, May." May got out of the car, gathering her belongings, and gave David one last wave before heading into her building. She could feel his eyes on her back as she walked away, and she resisted the urge to turn around for one more look. Inside her apartment, everything was exactly as she had left it 2 days ago. Yet somehow it all looked different. Her roommate Lisa was at work, so May had the place to herself. She walked slowly through the familiar rooms, trying to readjust to her normal life after the surreal interlude of the past 48 hours. Her bed, with its practical cotton sheets and well-worn comforter, looked smaller somehow after the luxurious guest bed at David's apartment. Her kitchen, with its mismatched dishes and appliances collected over years of roommate changes, seemed cramped compared to David's spacious, well-equipped cooking space, but it was home, filled with her things, her history, her life as she had built it. She ran her fingers along the spines of her own modest book collection, picked up a framed photo of her family, breathed in the familiar scent of the lavender candle she always kept on her desk. May unpacked her few belongings, putting her damp uniform in the laundry basket and carefully folding the borrowed clothes from Priya, setting them aside to return later. She took a hot shower in her own bathroom, with its temperamental water pressure and collection of half-empty shampoo bottles. Afterward, wrapped in her favorite robe, she made herself a cup of tea and curled up on the sofa, her mind full of thoughts of the past 2 days. Had it really only been 48 hours since she stood shivering at that bus stop? It seemed impossible that such a short time could feel so significant. The sound of a key in the lock interrupted her thoughts. Lisa burst in, bringing with her a gust of cold air and the energy she always seemed to radiate. "May, you're home!" she exclaimed, dropping her bag and rushing over to give May a hug. "I was so worried when you didn't come home during the storm. Then when you called from the CEO's place, that was wild. You have to tell me everything." May laughed at her roommate's enthusiasm. "There's not much to tell, honestly. He saw me stranded at the bus stop, offered me a ride, and then a place to stay when we realized I couldn't get home." Lisa kicked off her boots and plopped down on the sofa beside May. "Not much to tell? Are you kidding me? You spent 2 nights at a rich, handsome CEO's luxury apartment. That's straight out of a romance novel." "It wasn't like that," May protested, though she could feel her cheeks warming. "It was just one person helping another during a crisis. He was being kind." Lisa said skeptically. "And is this kind, handsome CEO married?" "No," May admitted. "But that doesn't mean anything happened." "Did you want something to happen?" Lisa asked, her expression shifting from teasing to genuine curiosity. May considered the question. "I don't know," she said honestly. "It was all so unexpected. He's not at all what I would have imagined a CEO to be like. He's thoughtful and down-to-earth and really passionate about improving medical equipment because of his mother's experience as a patient." Lisa's eyes widened. "Oh my God, you like him." "I barely know him," May pointed out. "But you spent 2 full days together," Lisa countered. "That's like 10 regular dates in terms of getting to know someone. And you just got this dreamy look in your eyes when you talked about him." "Did not," May protested, though she knew Lisa wasn't entirely wrong. There was something about David that had gotten under her skin, something beyond his obvious kindness and good looks. "So are you going to see him again?" Lisa asked. "Maybe," May said. "He mentioned his company is doing a demonstration of their new equipment at the hospital next week. He invited me to stop by." Lisa clapped her hands together. "You have to go. This is like a fairy tale." The CEO and the nurse brought together by a snowstorm. May rolled her eyes at her roommate's romanticism. "It's a professional demonstration, not a date." "But it could lead to a date," Lisa insisted. "Promise me you'll go, even if you have to switch shifts to make it happen." "I'll try," May said. "But only because I'm actually interested in the new equipment. It affects my job, you know." Sure, Lisa said with a knowing smile. "The equipment. That's definitely what you're interested in." Despite her protests, May found herself smiling at Lisa's teasing. There was something nice about sharing the experience with someone else, making it real instead of just a dreamlike memory. Later that evening, as May prepared for her night shift at the hospital, she found herself paying more attention than usual to her appearance, using a bit more care with her hair, adding a touch of lip balm, selecting her newest set of scrubs. She told herself it was just because she felt refreshed after her unexpected break. But deep down, she knew there was more to it. As she left the apartment, bundled up against the still chilly evening air, she noticed the streets were almost completely cleared now, with life returning to normal across the city. The buses were running on schedule, the sidewalks were bustling with people, and the storm was quickly becoming just another weather event in the city's collective memory. But for May, those 48 hours would always be more than just a storm story. They represented a moment when her life had taken an unexpected turn, when a simple act of kindness, "You're coming with me," had opened a door to possibilities she hadn't imagined. As she boarded the bus to the hospital, May found herself looking forward to Wednesday with an anticipation that both excited and frightened her. Whatever happened next, she knew that something had changed during those snowbound days, something inside her that couldn't be explained away as easily as a chance encounter during a storm. The bus pulled away from the curb, carrying her back to her normal routine. But May knew that routines could change, that paths could diverge and reconnect in unexpected ways. Sometimes all it took was the courage to say yes when opportunity knocked, or when a kind stranger pulled up to a bus stop in the middle of a snowstorm and offered a ride. The next week passed in a blur of shifts, patient care and the normal rhythms of May's life. Yet underlying it all was a current of anticipation that made even the most routine tasks seem somehow different. She found her thoughts drifting to David at unexpected moments, while charting patient information during her bus ride home, as she sipped her morning coffee. Wednesday approached with both glacial slowness and alarming speed. May had managed to arrange her schedule so she would be working the morning shift, free by the time of the presentation at 2 p.m. She told herself it was professional interest that motivated her. After all, as an ER nurse, she used the infusion pumps daily. Understanding the newest features would benefit her work. But the flutter in her stomach when she thought about seeing David again suggested other motivations as well. When Wednesday finally arrived, May spent more time than usual getting ready after her morning shift ended. She changed from scrubs into the jeans and sweater Priya had given her, carefully applied a touch of makeup and freed her hair from its practical work bun, letting it fall in loose waves around her shoulders. Just a professional demonstration, she murmured to her reflection, echoing what she had told Lisa. But the extra care she took with her appearance belied her words. At 1:50 p.m., Mee made her way to the third-floor conference room, her heart beating a little faster than normal. The room was already half full with hospital administrators, physicians, and fellow nurses. Presentation materials and refreshments were arranged on tables along one wall, and at the front of the room, several of the newest infusion pump models were displayed on pedestals. And there was David, dressed in a well-tailored navy suit that somehow made him look both more professional and more approachable than May remembered. He was speaking with the hospital's chief of medicine, gesturing occasionally toward one of the pump models, his expression animated and engaged. May hesitated at the doorway, suddenly unsure. In David's apartment during those snowbound days, they had been just two people connecting over shared meals and conversations. Here in this professional setting, he was clearly the CEO, confident, authoritative, at the center of attention. The contrast made her wonder if the connection she'd felt had been real, or merely a product of their unusual circumstances. Before she could decide whether to slip away or join the gathering, David looked up and saw her. His face transformed with a smile that reached his eyes, and he excused himself from his conversation to make his way toward her. "May," he said warmly when he reached her. "You came. I wasn't sure if your schedule would allow it." "I managed to arrange things," she replied, matching his smile. "I was curious about the new models." "Of course," he nodded, his eyes twinkling slightly as if he understood the professional pretext for her presence, but appreciated it nonetheless. "We've made some significant improvements based on feedback from nurses just like you." There was a brief, charged silence between them, both aware of the unspoken currents beneath their casual conversation. "How have you been?" David asked, his tone shifting to something more personal. "Getting back to normal after our snowstorm adventure?" "Yes, mostly," May said. "Though normal seems a little different somehow." David's expression softened. "I know exactly what you mean." Before they could continue their conversation, the hospital administrator called everyone's attention to begin the presentation. David gave May an apologetic smile. "Duty calls," he said. "But save me a few minutes afterward?" May nodded, a warm feeling spreading through her chest at the knowledge that he wanted to speak with her again. The presentation was impressive. David was a natural speaker, clearly passionate about the improvements they had made to the infusion pumps, safety features that reduced medication errors, more intuitive controls designed with input from nurses and physicians, better battery life, and streamlined maintenance procedures. He spoke with authority but without condescension, occasionally deferring to the technical specialist from his company for detailed questions. May found herself genuinely interested in the innovations, mentally noting features that would make her daily work easier. But she was equally captivated by David himself, the way he commanded the room without dominating it, how he listened attentively to every question, his clear pride in his company's work, not for profit's sake, but for the positive impact on patient care. This was a side of David she had glimpsed during their conversations, but was now seeing in full force. The CEO was not separate from the man who had rescued her from the bus stop. They were one and the same, driven by compassion and a desire to make a difference. When the formal presentation ended and people began mingling, examining the equipment up close and enjoying the refreshments, May found herself drawn into conversations with colleagues who wanted her perspective on the new features. She kept David in her peripheral vision, watching as he moved through the room, engaging with various hospital staff. Finally, as the crowd began to thin, David made his way back to her. "What did you think?" he asked. "I'm impressed," May said honestly, "especially with the new alarm system that distinguishes between critical and non-critical alerts. That's going to reduce alarm fatigue significantly." David's face lit up at her specific feedback. That feature came directly from focus groups with nurses. They kept mentioning how the constant alarms for minor issues made them less responsive over time, which could lead to missing something important. "It's obvious you really listen to the people who use these devices every day," May observed. "That's rare in medical technology." "It's essential," David replied. "The best engineers in the world can't design effective equipment without understanding the real-world context it operates in." They fell into easy conversation about healthcare innovations, with May sharing some of her experiences with various technologies, and David explaining the development process behind his company's products. It felt like an extension of their discussions during the snowstorm. Natural, engaged, intellectually stimulating. As the room emptied further, David checked his watch. "I have about 30 minutes before my next meeting," he said. "Would you like to grab a coffee in the hospital cafe? I'd love to continue our conversation." "I'd like that," May replied, trying to keep her voice casual despite the leap her heart gave at the suggestion. They made their way to the cafe, which was relatively quiet in the mid-afternoon lull between lunch and dinner. After getting their drinks, a black coffee for David and a chai latte for May, they found a small table near the window overlooking the hospital gardens, now beginning to emerge from beneath the melting snow. "How have your shifts been this week?" David asked, his attention fully focused on her in a way that made May feel like the most important person in the room. "Busy, but good," she replied. "The ER is always unpredictable, but that's part of why I love it. No 2 days are ever the same." "That's how I feel about my work too," David said, "though I imagine your unpredictable is a bit more intense than mine. Board meetings can get heated, but no one's life is usually hanging in the balance." May smiled at his self-deprecating humor. "True, but your decisions affect thousands of patients in the long run. The equipment your company develops can save lives every day in hospitals around the country." David looked thoughtful. "I try to remember that when I'm buried in spreadsheets and quarterly projections. It's easy to get lost in the business side and forget the ultimate purpose." "Is that why you do the hospital presentations yourself?" May asked. "To stay connected to the purpose?" "Exactly," David nodded, looking pleased that she had understood. "I could send the marketing team or the sales directors, but then I'd miss hearing directly from the people who use our products. Plus," he added with a slight smile, "sometimes you meet interesting people at hospitals." The comment hung in the air between them, an acknowledgement of their unusual connection. May felt a flush rise to her cheeks, but she held David's gaze. "I've been thinking about our snowstorm days quite a bit," David said, his voice softer now. "They felt like a pause button on real life in the best possible way." "I know what you mean," May agreed. "It was like being in a snow globe separate from the rest of the world." "I've been wondering," David continued, a hint of nervousness showing through his usual confidence, "if you might be interested in continuing our conversations, perhaps over dinner sometime." The question was asked casually, but May could sense the genuine hope behind it. This was David the man asking, not David the CEO. "I'd like that very much," she replied, her voice steadier than she expected given the butterflies in her stomach. David's smile brightened the entire room. "Great. How about Friday evening? If you're not working, that is." "Friday is perfect," May said. "I'm off the whole weekend, actually." "Even better," David replied. "I know a small Italian place that makes incredible pasta. Unless you'd prefer something else?" "Italian sounds wonderful," May assured him. They exchanged phone numbers, the simple act feeling strangely significant. Their snowbound connection was officially extending into their real lives, transforming from an isolated incident into something with potential for growth. All too soon, David checked his watch again. "I hate to cut this short, but I have that meeting across town in 20 minutes. "Of course," May nodded. "I understand." They walked together to the hospital entrance, their steps naturally falling into the same rhythm. Outside the air was crisp but much warmer than the night they'd met, with sunshine sparkling on the remaining patches of snow. "I'll text you the restaurant details," David said as they prepared to part ways. he to his waiting car, she back inside to gather her things. "I'll look forward to it," May replied. For a moment, they stood facing each other, neither quite ready to say goodbye. Then David took a small step closer. "I'm really glad you came to the presentation today," he said softly. "I'm glad I did too," May answered, equally quiet. David reached out and briefly touched her arm, a gesture both tentative and full of promise. "I'll see you Friday, May." "See you Friday, David." As they parted ways, May couldn't help but reflect on how differently things had unfolded from what she might have expected that snowy night at the bus stop. What had begun as a simple act of kindness, "You're coming with me," had evolved into something neither of them could have anticipated. 6 months later, the story of how they met had become a favorite among their friends and families. "He kidnapped me during a snowstorm," May would joke, while David would protest, "I rescued you." There's a difference. Their relationship had developed with surprising ease, each discovery about the other fitting naturally into the foundation, built during those first snowbound days. They came from different worlds in many ways. May's practical healthcare perspective, balancing David's corporate viewpoint, yet their core values aligned perfectly. David's passion for improving medical equipment took on new dimensions as May connected him with more frontline healthcare workers, creating feedback channels that led to even better designs. May found her own horizons expanding as she began to understand the complexities of bringing medical innovations from concept to implementation. What started as personal growth between them soon expanded outward. One evening over dinner, 3 months into their relationship, David shared an idea that had been forming in his mind. "I've been thinking about the challenges healthcare workers face that go beyond equipment," he said. "The practical struggles that affect their ability to provide care, transportation issues during bad weather, affordable housing near hospitals, childcare for night shifts." May nodded, intimately familiar with these challenges from both her own experience and those of her colleagues. What if Jong Medical established a foundation specifically focused on supporting healthcare workers? David continued, his eyes alight with possibility. Not just nurses and doctors, but everyone who keeps hospitals running. Technicians, housekeeping staff, food service workers.